What's up, fight fans? I'm Michael Montero for Boxing Monthly. You're watching the Neutral Corner for the week of June 25th. All right, so here we are, the last fight week of June. Man, this year is almost half over. This is crazy. Summer is officially here. We had some 100-degree weather here in Los Angeles. I feel like I'm melting. Let's get into some news and notes. So the fight between Abner Mares and Jesus Cuellar has been canceled. The New York State Athletic Commission said it was a medical issue, quote unquote. And obviously this is related to the eye of Abner Mares. Abner Mares and his team haven't said anything. Obviously, they felt that they could fight. Different commissions, different state commissions kind of have different guidelines. I'll say this much for the New York State Athletic Commissions. Ever since the tragedy with Magomed Abdusalamov a few years ago and their complete mishandling of that entire situation, for those of you who are not familiar with it, Google it, or I'll put some links to that whole story below here in the description. But ever since that tragedy, which I thought the New York State Athletic Commission should have been held liable and should have been sued and covered Abdusalamov's medical expenses. But they've been really sticky with some of the medical stuff, the medical clearance stuff. So I think that this fight between Mares and Cuellar probably would have been okayed in other commissions where they're not as sensitive about these sort of things. But that fight is off. That was, of course, going to be the co-feature this weekend's big card. So that's kind of a buzzkill, but it's still a really good week of boxing, a good Saturday of boxing, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. Speaking of boxing coming up, Sergey KovalevWard is scheduled right now for T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, November 19th. So obviously, I'm happy that this fight is scheduled. Now look, it hasn't officially been announced because both guys have interim fights. I'll talk more about that in just a second. But I'm happy that it's scheduled. It's on the books for that date. They got the venue, the whole nine. I didn't think it was going to happen this year. I really didn't. And I'm still not 100% sure. But it's a buzzkill for me being at T-Mobile Arena. You guys know that I was there for Canelo Khan a couple months back. I just don't like the arena. I get it for fans. I understand why fans would like the arena. It's brand new, it's state of the art. And I think if you're in the fan sections and you have your cell phone and stuff, I think the internet works pretty good. But for us in the press section, and ask anybody who covered that Canelo Khan fight, the internet was horrible. And it's called the T-Mobile Arena. You'd think that they have better internet. It's not just that. It's the entire situation with the media. There was no press center, no media center, no media room inside the T-Mobile Arena. That was set up about a block or so away in the MGM Grand. So we had to take a shuttle from the MGM Grand to the T-Mobile Arena. So you're kind of going back and forth between those two locations all during fight week. Because if you wanted to get your story out, you had to get back to the media center to type everything out where you had internet access. And that's also where they served all the media meals. So if you wanted to get your free lunch, your free dinner, whatever, you had to hang out in the media center, then take the shuttle over to T-Mobile to actually see the fights and the weigh-in, all the events, all that stuff. It was a massive clusterfuck. And I'm not looking forward to going back there ever again. But for KovalevWard, I might have to make the trip. One last note about that, the venue, it's a 20,000 seat arena. It's in Vegas, November 19th. I believe that's the week before Thanksgiving, the biggest national holiday here in America, pretty much, right? When it comes to travel and seeing family and stuff like that. Non-religious holiday, anyway, the biggest non-religious holiday. It's during the holiday season, right? Where people are saving for the end of the year to buy presents for their families, all this good stuff. That's a hard sell, man. That's a hard sell to try to get 20,000 people in there. So unless they're going to really reduce ticket prices, I don't know how they get anywhere near a sellout for that fight. Because as important as it is to diehard boxing fans, the mainstream could care less. the mainstream fans in this country don't know anything about Sergey Kovalev or Andrzej Ward. Some people might look at Andrzej Ward and say, oh, that's the guy from Creed. But that's it, right? But interim bouts, we already know, I've talked about Sergey Kovalev's is July 11th against Isaac Chilemba. That's on Monday. That's going to be back in Russia. And HBO is going to televise that. Well, Andrzej Ward, it's been announced, is going to fight Alexander Brand on August 6th in Oakland, of course, because that's where he likes to fight. Alexander Brand is the guy that Andrzej Ward wanted to fight on that Canelo Cotto card last November, but he had a sore knee, so he pulled out. He was heavily criticized for that opponent. Remember, he had chosen another opponent that the Nevada State Athletic Commission turned down. Alexander Brand was his second choice of opponent. So here we go, going almost a year later, and he's picking Alexander Brand now for his tune-up fight. So let's look at these two tune-up fights. And I believe, it hasn't been officially announced, but I believe the Alexander Brand fight will be televised on HBO Boxing. So the Isaac Chilemba fight for Sergey Kovalev, that's coming very, very cheap. I think tape delay type of thing for HBO. But they're probably going to have to pay out more for this Andrzej Ward-Alexander Brand fight if they're going to televise that live from Oakland. And that's part of the problem with these exclusive deals that networks are doing with fighters now. This is kind of the bullshit you get into sometimes. But just looking at these two tune-up fights, okay? Looking at the resume of Isaac Chilemba, who's fought a lot of top fighters, has lost most of those fights, but has been in with top fighters, has good experience, and has always been competitive for the most part in his big fights. And is a guy that doesn't get stopped. You compare that to Alexander Brand, who's basically been in with nobody. That's just looking at these matchups, okay? Which one is preparing the guy better for November 19th? Compare the styles they fight in. Think about the difficulty, the experience of the level of fighter. Is Sergey Kovalev or Andrzej Ward going to come into that November 19th matchup sharper and ready for such a big fight, the biggest fight of both men's careers? You'd have to think Sergey Kovalev picked the better opponent here, you know? Here's my thing. There's just this, I guess I'm just pessimistic because so many fights have been canceled and Andrzej Ward has frustrated us so much over the years. I think Kovalev will take care of business against Isaac Chilemba. And even if that fight goes all 12, he's going to get rounds in and everything like that. I think that Andrzej Ward could possibly stop Alexander Brand. It probably will go all 12 as well, but I think that he might be able to stop him late. What I'm worried about is a possible cut or some kind of injury to Andrzej Ward in the Alexander Brand fight that pushes back that November 19th date with Kovalev to next year. It's just been the MO. Again, this all is kind of coming full circle. I'm talking T-Mobile, I'm talking Cotto Canelo last year, Andrzej Ward pulling out of a fight because he had a sore knee. It wasn't any legitimate injury that a doctor signed off on saying you can't train. He just didn't feel comfortable fighting. Alexander Brand last November, here he is now. In August, he's going to fight him. I don't know, man. If there's a headbutt and a cut or something or a hand injury, I know a lot of you guys are like planning your hotel room packages for Vegas the weekend of November 19th. I say hold off until August. Check things out, and the hotel prices and everything, the travel, the plane ticket prices and all that to Vegas for that weekend are cheap because it's off season. It's cheap. So I think you guys will be good. I also think that tickets are going to continue to be priced lower and lower and lower for that fight if it does happen November 19th. So don't rush and get your hotel rooms and all that stuff now unless you can cancel that and get it refunded, because I'm telling you, I just got this suspicion that there's going to be some kind of injury or something and that fight's going to get pushed back. But talking about other potential big fights, there's rumors going around that we might see Gennady Golovkin travel over to the UK in late August, early September and fight Eubank Jr. That would be a very, very big fight. And Eubank Senior and junior are all about it. They're all about taking on challenges, right? They ain't scared of nobody. I don't think he's ready for Golovkin, but I think the fact that the fight would be in the UK would be an advantage, would give them some confidence going into that fight. Bigger guy, stronger guy than Gennady. Much, much bigger middleweight and stronger middleweight than Gennady Golovkin is. But you know, Golovkin wants titles, and Billy Joe Saunders has a title. And Billy Joe has talked a lot of trash on Twitter, kind of like Irizlandi Lara, but he's not backing it up. He's not really backing up any of his trash talk on Twitter regarding any fighter in recent years right now. So this kind of pigeonholes Billy Joe Saunders a little bit, if this were to happen. As of now, it's just all talk. But man, I love this fight if it happens. And Golovkin, who hasn't fought in the UK, he could further build his brand. And they're all about that, the Golovkin team. So more to come on that. But so far, that's the rumor. We'll see what happens over the coming weeks and months now that Canelo Alvarez and Golden Boy Promotions are kind of freed up to start negotiating. I still don't think that fight between Golovkin and Canelo would happen this year, but you never know, right? So there's just a lot up in the air right now regarding these big potential matchups, and it's almost like little chess moves. Each little move determines what everyone else is going to do. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Last Saturday, the 18th in Chicago, it was PBC on NBC. And man, we got our upset of the year. I don't think this is going to be topped. Joe Smith Jr. scores a first round knockout about 2.5 minutes into the first round, I believe, against Andrzej Fonfara, the heavily favored fighter. I think the odds were 14-1. Some bookmakers had it. And obviously, this is a runaway for upset of the year. And I think we've already got our round of the year, our KO of the year, and our fight of the year. I think we have clear favorites. This is absolutely, I do not see this being topped, upset of the year. Joe Smith, unheralded fighter coming into this. Basically a part-time boxer, full-time construction worker out there on Long Island. Came into this fight basically as a no-name. Nobody outside of that community right there really knew who he was. And myself and pretty much everybody else was talking last week in the lead up to this fight about, man, what kind of matchup is this? What the hell are they doing? This is NBC, prime time for a Premier Boxing Champions, and this is the main event you're putting on. What the hell? Well, it turns out it was one of the most dramatic moments in PBC's brief history, right? For me, it was very reminiscent of the 2005 fight between Andrew Golota and Layman Brewster. That, I believe, was also in Chicago. Andrew Golota was the first real popular Polish fighter, at least with Polish American fans over here. And he definitely had a fan base. He kind of set the precedent for guys like Andrzej Fonfara and some of these other Polish fighters that have, really had some success over here in North America. But he was, I don't know if he was necessarily favored coming into that fight. In fact, I believe Golota was coming off losses. But Brewster came into that fight, I believe he had just won a controversial decision over Cali Meehan. Correct me if I'm wrong on my timeline here, but just, in the back of my mind, I believe that's what happened. And a lot of people felt that Brewster got a gift in his last decision coming into that Golota fight. So a lot of people favored Golota. Plus it was in Chicago with all the Polish fans. And Golota, as crazy as a motherfucker as he was very big, very strong, very athletic. One of the more athletic heavyweights of that era. And had some skills, but he was batshit crazy. And Brewster just took it to him. And the first big shot, I want to say Brewster hit him just with left hooks, just over and over with left hooks. And I think dropped him 2 or 3 times, and he was out in like 30 seconds. So it wasn't exactly the same kind of knockout, but it was that devastating kind of performance in Chicago, in front of the Polish fans, a Polish fighter just being taken out like that. For this fight, Joe Smith Jr., look, Fonfara has shown a very, very good chin. He's been dropped, he's been hurt, he's even been stopped before. But for the most part, he has shown a toughness and a grit. But he just got nailed with a perfect overhand right. And Joe Smith, after the fight, in the interview, said, Look, I knew the guy was going to come in with heavy shots, and my plan was to unload on him or to counter him while he was unloading on me. When he comes in, cover up, look for a hole, and take it. That's exactly what he did. It was nice to hear a boxer in an articulate way state his game plan, and it's exactly what he did. And I think Smith was backed up on the ropes, if I remember correctly, with his guard up, but not too tight or even too wide, just right in the middle where he could see what was coming. And Fonfara had his chin out there, was teeing off, and he backed straight up. And he's a tall fighter. He's got to be 6'2 or 6'3, tall, light heavyweight. He might even be 6'4. He's a tall guy. Backed straight up with his chin up. And what I liked about what Smith did is he didn't come straight with the right hand. He looped it. He looped it because Fonfara was shooting. He was shooting, right? So he's shooting these shots, backing straight up. You back up that looping shot, you're going to go right into it. And it's more or less what happened. Check out the meme, the GIF, whatever. It's all over social media right now. But sick-ass knockout or knockdown. Fonfara is a tough motherfucker because he went down and he got up. He should have took a knee. He should have waited, but he was done. Part of me thought, man, if he could make it out of this round, because there was only about 30 seconds left, but he didn't cover up. He couldn't, right? He was just in bad shape, and the ref called it off. I don't think it mattered. Some people I saw on Twitter were like, it could have been stopped a little later. I don't think it mattered. I think that shot was so clean and so devastating. If some way Fonfara made it out of that first round, he was being taken out in the second round. Just an outstanding performance from Joe Smith Jr., who you would have to think will no longer be a full-time construction worker. You'd have to think that some of the money he made from this fight and possible investors out there in Long Island where he's from will step up and give him some training money to train year-round. Here's the thing. This guy has to fight again this year. Smith barely got in 3 minutes of work, right? Barely took any hits, barely broke a sweat in that fight. Scored the upset of the year. It's a great story. PBC, Mr. Heyman, advisors, Mr. Watson, Watson twins, all of you, please get this guy back on television. In the next 2 or 3 months, he should be on once, twice more this year. That's how you build these things up. Hit it while the kettle's hot, right? Okay, enough about that fight. Rau'Shee Warren wins a majority decision over Juan Carlos Payano to win the title to become the WBA Bantamweight Super Champ. And look, this is a rematch of their fight from last year where Payano won a controversial close decision. I watched this fight pretty closely. I thought that Rau'Shee Warren sat down on his punches better. You guys, I've talked about how he has a very amateurish style. Doesn't sit down on his punches. He tried to do that more. And there was a few times where I don't want to say he hurt Payano, but he certainly got his attention. And I thought he clearly won this fight. The one judge that had this a draw, 114-114, I don't know what he was watching. The other judges had it 115-113. I thought that was the right score. I could even see 116-112 for Warren. But it was still a close competitive fight. And Warren said afterwards that he would welcome a rubber match if they wanted to do a rubber match. I thought this was a pretty good scrap. It wasn't a great fight. It was a pretty entertaining fight for bantamweights. I mentioned that he is now the WBA Super Champ. Jamie McConnell is the WBA regular champ. He's out of Yorkshire. Al Heyman's been working with a lot of these British fighters, right? He's been working with the British promoters. He's been expanding his business there in the British market. So maybe we can see I want to call it unification, but it's not. It's for the same freaking title, but a combining of the entire WBA bantamweight title between Warren and McConnell. I think that'd be an interesting fight, especially if Warren were willing to go over there to the UK, and we know that Heyman can do business over there because he has been. So I think that's the way to go if you're PBC and you want to continue to build on this thing with Warren, who's a good story for American boxing, right? So if you want to push this thing, I think that's the way to go with that fight. Also on this card, the Polish fighter, Maciej I'm not sure how to say the first name, last name, Sullock, scores a 10th round TKO over Oxnard, LA area fighter Hugo Centeno Jr. That was his first loss. For Sullock, he improves to 23-0 with 8 knockouts. He only has 8 knockouts and 23 wins. What's interesting is his last 5 fights, he's won by stoppage. So he only had 3 knockouts in his first 18 pro fights. But a lot of them were short fights. I want to say like 4-rounders, 6-rounders. He carries power late in fights, this Polish fighter. So this was a battle of undefeated prospects. It'll be interesting to see where he goes from there. But he kind of, he came out after that upset of the year where Fonfara lost. Fonfara lost. And Sullock kind of won back the Polish crowd, right? The Polish fans were kind of bummed out. And he kind of gave them a consolation prize. Also, undefeated prospect Erickson Lubin scores the 3rd round TKO over Daniel Sandoval. He keeps rolling along. Good-looking prospect, you know. So this is another guy that PBC has, is another good, undefeated prospect with some serious potential. Just got to keep these guys fighting. Got to keep them fighting on TV. I have to report the ratings thing. Some of you guys saw this, but a lot of you probably didn't. This PBC and NBC broadcast did a 0.8 rating. One of the worst ratings for sports broadcasts on NBC ever, right? On American television in recent years. Just one of the worst. Very, very few have done a lower rating than that. It's obviously the lowest rating for PBC on NBC so far. So why is that? Well, it's a few things. None of these fighters are very, very recognizable. It was a Saturday in the middle of the summer. People are out doing things. But the biggest part is some of what I've talked about in this episode, what I've talked about in other episodes, is these guys fighting once or twice a year. You've got to keep these guys fighting. Here you have Rau'Shee Warren winning a title out of Cincinnati. This is a great story for American boxing. A guy that was a very successful amateur, now winning a world title, even if it's a fractured title with Jamie McDonnell. You have Joe Smith Jr. winning the upset of the year. These are nice stories. You have to build upon that. If these guys don't fight again this year, or they don't fight again until December or something, it goes out of people's minds. So even though this did a very low rating, there's a story here with that big upset win. You can build upon it, and maybe the next rating will be a 1.2 or a 1.5, but you've got to strike while the kettle's hot. And that's the biggest issue with the PBC right now, is these guys just don't fight enough, so you can't build fans. This Friday, the 24th in Beijing, China, Javier Fortuna, the Dominican WBA 130-pound titleist, he's going up against Jason Sosa. And look, Fortuna, undefeated fighter, 29-0. Like I said, he's out of the Dominican Republic. You guys probably recognize Jason Sosa's name because of his draw last December with Nicholas Axeman Walters. Sosa's out of New Jersey. I think Sosa, he proved in that fight with Walters that he's certainly no pushover. He's a good quality fighter. And I think he's going to give Fortuna a push here. I favor the Dominican fighter to defend his title, but why this fight is interesting to me is because it's for a legit 130-pound title, and we just had Vasyl Lomachenko move up in weight and grab a title at 130 pounds. So, Loma wants to unify titles, and obviously Fortuna, if he should be successful, he's a guy that is willing to travel. I think we could see a potential unification fight between those two at some point. And, I want to see unification fights wherever we can, but especially at 130 pounds. If the fights happen that should happen, and if guys like Nicholas Walters get active again, and possibly some of these guys at featherweight end up moving up to 130. Man, we've got some great matchups where 130 could become one of, or if not the best division in all of boxing. It just is going to require some of these guys making the fights happen. But make sure you check that one out if you can find a stream or something. It should be a very, very good quality fight. Obviously, though, it's all about this Saturday. And the big action, well, let's start over in the UK. Got Anthony Joshua, the IBF titleist, who is going up against Dominick Breazeale, American fighter, another one of these Al Haymon PBC guys that, look, PBC, you know, Al Haymon, very, very intelligently, they are in the Anthony Joshua business. This one, again, is at O2 Arena. Expect a sellout crowd, a very wild, rowdy crowd. Also on that card, George Groves versus Martin Murray, which is a great domestic matchup for that area. That should be a really, really fascinating fight. That's going to be the fight of the night, the fight that steals the show. But with Joshua and Breazeale, we actually know more about Breazeale than we know about Joshua at this point, right? What we know all the good things Joshua can do. We still haven't seen him go through that much adversity. We saw a little bit against Dillian Whyte. But with Breazeale, Breazeale is a big guy, strong guy, not very athletic, but moves okay for such a big guy. And size-wise might pose some interesting dilemmas for Joshua. But more than that, we've seen some toughness and some tenacity from Breazeale. He's faced a little adversity. He's taken a lot of punches. And so far, he's responded well. He's gotten off the canvas. He's shown a real fighter's mentality, a real fighter's type of grit. So what will be interesting to see is how he's going to respond when a big, strong, athletic heavyweight like Anthony Joshua clocks him. Because the one thing we know for sure about Dominick Breazeale is he is not hard to hit, okay? It's harder to hit a piñata than it is to hit Dominick Breazeale. A piñata with no blindfold on. I just screwed that joke up. It's not hard to hit Breazeale, okay? So for Joshua, it's not a matter of if, but when he connects. What's going to be interesting is to see how Breazeale reacts. And look, the last fight against Charles Martin proved absolutely nothing. It was just a way for Breazeale to get a title. I do think, or a way for Joshua to get a title, sorry. But I do think that Breazeale will take Joshua a few more rounds than Charles Martin did, because he's a little better than Charles Martin. And he's a little more battle-tested, a little more proven. So expect this one to maybe go 3, 4, 5 rounds. I really, really think it could. If Joshua gets Breazeale out of there in the first or second round, I'll be impressed. I'll be very, very impressed. And it wouldn't surprise me at all, but it would be very, very impressive. Groves and Murray. Look, George Groves is the younger fighter, the bigger fighter. He's a career super middleweight. I think he's even had some fights at light heavyweight when he was, just a prospect. Murray, of course, fought at 160 for a while and then came up to 68 recently. You gotta favor Groves in this fight. I think it's probably going to go all 12. The one thing about Groves is he has shown a tendency to fade late in fights. So if he starts to fade in this fight and Murray has anything left in the gas tank, maybe he could score a late stoppage here. But I favor Groves by decision in a very entertaining fight between two, I think, underrated fighters, but guys who are getting a little long in the tooth and obviously past their best. Also on this card, Eubank Jr., Dillian Whyte, Anthony Ogogo fighting. They really stack these cards over there at the O2 Arena, man. Hearn stacks these cards. This should be a fun card for you guys who are going there live. Tweet me and tweet some pictures and stuff. Let me know what the atmosphere is like over there while you're there before you get too drunk. Tweet some pictures. Also, obviously here in the United States, a big matchup in New York at Barclays Center in Brooklyn, to be exact, between Keith Thurman and Shawn Porter. And also on that card, there are several prospects. Jarrett Hurd, a guy out of Maryland. He's a prospect you might want to keep an eye on if you get a chance to see him. To my knowledge, they're not streaming any of the undercard fights, though, for that, which is a bit of a bummer. But let's talk about the main event there. Okay. When this fight was first talked about, and I feel like this fight has been on the schedule for like years, but it hasn't. It's just, it was delayed because of the car accident that Keith Thurman suffered. He claims he suffered an injury there, and they had to postpone this fight. So it's been a long time coming. But when this was first announced, I, like most people, favored Shawn Porter. Or, I'm sorry, Keith Thurman. I'm losing my mind here. I favored Keith Thurman because he's, I believe, the more athletic fighter. And even though he is a little taller, he's not much taller, but he's longer. I think he's got the longer arms, the longer limbs, which is better for boxing. And I just think he's a more fluid, complete type of boxer compared to Shawn Porter. But with all the postponements and the delays, you look at Thurman, if he really did have an injury and he really was sitting idle for a few weeks there and recovering and everything, there's going to be so much rust there. Neither of these guys has fought in about a year. It's really been about a year. I think for Porter it was last June. I think for Thurman it was last July. But Porter did have that exhibition a couple months back. Remember, and PBC streamed that live on Facebook. And I know it's an exhibition, but he got some work in. And he's been in the gym. One thing about Porter, the Porters, him and his father, you know, they're about business. They stay in the gym, they stay in shape. And Shawn Porter's father has made it very, very clear in interviews this week that he feels his son is in better shape and will have less rust coming into the ring. So I'm starting to move towards Shawn Porter by majority decision, split decision, something like that, where maybe one judge has it for Thurman, two have it for Porter, or something like that. I'm just starting to get this, you know, vision in my head where if Thurman can't get Porter's respect early with something big, Shawn's going to maul him all night long. He's just going to get inside on him and maul him. And he did that with Kell Brook early in their fight a couple years ago, right? But and he won those early rounds. I thought Shawn Porter won early rounds against Brook. But Brook is a bigger, stronger welterweight. I think Brook's going to end up moving to junior middleweight soon enough. And he was able to make adjustments and switch gears and push Porter off and keep him honest and land big enough shots to make Shawn think twice before jumping in there. And then he started timing him, and Brook controlled the last 3-4 rounds of that fight, I felt, after winning the middle rounds. Can Thurman do that? I just don't know, man. Maybe Thurman a couple years ago could. Maybe Thurman, who, you know, if he had just fought 3 months ago, could. But will Thurman be able to do that, having not fought in a year, having fought off injuries and everything else? I just don't know. And I'm thinking that when you look at their resumes, Porter has fought the better opposition as a pro. He just has, top to bottom. He's fought the better opposition. So he's seen more styles. He's had to respond to adversity. He's had to fight through cuts and all that good stuff, right? He was even dropped, even though it was a flash knockdown, but he was dropped in the 12th round against Adrian Broner in his last fight. And he got up and you know, finished that fight hard. I just think that he's more battle-tested, he's more proven, he's in the gym more, and I just have this feeling, man, he's going to pull out an upset special here. You heard it from me first. Maybe I'll look stupid. Wouldn't be the first time, won't be the last. Also, this Saturday, there's a small card at the Bomb Factory in Dallas. Matvey Korobov and Mike Alvarado are fighting. To my knowledge, that's not on TV or anything like that, but maybe you can find something online if that interests you. But other than that, guys, that's it, man. I think that this Saturday should be really, really entertaining. Starting in the afternoon, going all the way to Saturday night. It should really, really be fun, interesting matchups. Let me know what you guys think. Like, share, subscribe. I'll see you guys at the fights.